All right, a couple of questions from 717. One has to do with the illustration I used about Kim and bringing flowers to her. And the person says, am I not dangerously telling people not to follow the commandments? And I would argue I'm actually doing the exact opposite. What I'm saying is that two people with identical behaviors, both following the law, one's doing it out of a motive of obligation and the other's doing it out of a love relationship with God, that the one doing it purely out of obligation is actually not honoring God, and the one doing it out of a love for Him and a relationship with Him does honor Him. And the illustration I gave is, if I came home to Kim one day and I had flowers and I had booked a babysitter and we were going to go to dinner, and I knocked on the door and she came to the door and opened the door, and I presented her the flowers and I said, hey, why don't you get dressed? We're going to go to dinner tonight. I got a babysitter coming. It's a surprise. And she says to me, why are you doing this? And I say, well, because I'm supposed to. That if I do that, that's not the same thing as if she says, why are you doing these things? And I said, because I love you. And so I'm suggesting not ignoring the commandment. What I'm suggesting is that to purely obey the commandment and not have the heart engaged, the law functioning purely as I'm going to keep the law, I'm going to keep the law. Why? Because I was told to keep the law, is in fact a violation of the very law itself, because it claims that somehow in my own power, apart from the work of God in my life and a love for Him, motivated out of a love for Him, that this will somehow please God. That kind of law keeping is about pleasing myself. If I say to Kim, I bought you these flowers, why'd you do it? Well, because I'm supposed to do it. I'm doing it for me then, not for her. What I want to do is to love her, and my expression of love for her, the behaviors may look the same, but the attitude is radically different. And so I would actually suggest, I'm not telling people to ignore it says, but this message seems to be implying that we're not supposed to follow the commandments. Now, I said in both cases, you're buying flowers. In both cases, you're inviting her to dinner. In both cases, you're getting a babysitter. The behavior looks identical. What I'm suggesting is that the motive is the difference. And if I tell her my motive, which God knows our motive, so whether I say it out loud or not, if I tell God, my motive for this is that I'm trying to be good, I'm going to make myself good in your eyes, I can earn your favor, those kinds of things, that's an insult to a God who sent His Son to die on a cross for me. If instead I say, I'm going to follow according to your commandments, because I love you, out of a love relationship with you, then that's radically different. And what I'm trying to do is break this notion of law keeping as some kind of means of, well, this is the list and I'm supposed to keep it, instead of a following of the Spirit of God out of a love for God, which has almost identical looking behavior. But the difference in the end is that one person is self-righteous and the other person is simply doing this out of a deep, profound relationship with their Creator. And that's why Paul says, love each other as you love yourself is the fulfillment of the entire law and the prophets. Is that the motive, the behavior will look the same, but one is motivated out of a love for God and a love for others. And the other motivation is, I can keep this law, I'm a pretty good person, here's the list of things, I'm supposed to follow these rules. Those motives are radically different, even if the behavior will look the same. One says, why do you keep helping the poor? Well, I'm helping the poor because God tells me I have to. And the other person says, I'm helping the poor because God made them in His image and He loves them, so I love them too. And out of a profound love for them, I'm going to help the poor. Both behaviors look the same. One is honoring to God, the other's not. Just like if I say to Kim, I bought you flowers because that's what men are supposed to do for their wives. Instead of me saying, I bought you these flowers because I love you and I just wanted to take an opportunity to tell you how much I love you. I'm actually suggesting the behaviors won't look much different. And so you can't say I'm encouraging people to not follow the commands when I'm saying I don't think the behavior will be much different. What I'm suggesting to you is that I'm trying to protect us from pure external obedience or obeisance to the law with no heart engaged. Very dangerous world. Pharisees did it, and Jesus told them they were whitewashed tombs. So it is serious. It's very serious. In fact, Jesus said they're lost, going to hell, and their behavior was inconsistent. I mean, the behavior externally looked good, but their behavior was inconsistent with the heart. the heart was self-righteous. The heart wasn't doing it out of a love for God. The heart was doing it out of a love for self. So it's dangerous. That's why I'm guarding against that. That's why I gave that illustration. That's why Paul is saying what he's saying in the book of Romans. So I think that's very important issues. And no, I'm not endorsing antinomianism. I'm chastising Pharisaical life, which is what will happen with law following with no heart engaged. Second question is, why are there multiple gospels, and how come not all the gospels wrote a gospel? Not all the disciples wrote a gospel. Why do we only get 4 instead of 12 or something like that? A couple of answers. One is that every person learns differently and thinks differently and has different cultural backgrounds. And so like Matthew's gospel is a really technical work, and it has to do with more Jewish messianic worldview. Luke's gospel is it's a gospel that's more appealing to a broader cross-section of Greco-Roman world. Mark's gospel is very active, and so for some people who are very active people and are not as contemplated on theology, but love to watch what God does in the person of Christ. And then some are, deeply, profoundly spiritual gospels like John's gospel, which reflect more on the spiritual aspect of the life of Christ and its implications. So we get 4 different pictures. And let's say it this way. If you go to court and you want to prove that you did not do something or that you did something, if you had 4 witnesses, they wouldn't all 4 give the same testimony. And in fact, if they all gave the exact same testimony, this would create skepticism. People are like, wait, these people aren't giving their testimony. Someone's got one testimony, they're simply saying the same thing over and over again. When you have 4 different testimonies to the same thing, it gives credibility to the events, because here are 4 different eyewitnesses, 4 different testimonies, and yet even though they're different, they're so similar that we get credibility from it. And so that's what happens with 4 gospel writers. And remember that in the Old Testament, the requirement was that on the witness of 2 or more individuals will verify the veracity or truthfulness of something. So in this case, God gives us twice that, 4 witnesses to verify the veracity of the life of Christ. And John's gospel almost supplemental to that, because he gives us some different events that aren't in the other 3 synoptics. But he also shares some things that are very similar. And so each writer tells us the purpose of their writings at various levels. Luke's gospel opens up with that. John gives us in John 20:31 why he does it. But what we're getting is 4 different eyewitnesses to the same person, to the same life, but we get it from 4 different perspectives. And as such, it verifies the veracity of the life of Christ, while also speaking to different hearts and minds. We don't all learn the same way. We don't all experience information the same way. And by hearing Mark's gospel versus Luke's gospel versus John's gospel versus Matthew's gospel, what we get is a variety of witness, which means a variety of people can go, man, Mark's gospel really speaks to me, or Luke's gospel really speaks to me. For me, my preference is the gospel of Luke, for some various reasons. And then I'm kind of drawn to the gospel of John. But I've been around people who just love the gospel of Mark. It's so active. It says, and Jesus did this, and then he went and did this. And the word immediately is in the gospel of Mark several times. And so because of that, people like the gospel of Mark. So I think that's why we have 4 different gospels and not a single gospel. It gives veracity to it. It allows for different teaching and learning styles. It also gives us different contours and eyewitness accounts of the look of the life of Christ. And that's why I think we have 4 different ones. Now, why not every gospel person wrote? Because not every person can write. It's that simple. Not all people are writers. Some people are talkers, some people are preachers and teachers, and some people are good writers. And the 4 that wrote could actually write. The ones that didn't, probably, they're just not as good of writers, and it would have put them in a position to try to use gifts they don't have. If I had everyone at our church write an extensive paper on some theological subject, we would get a variety of gifting with that, right? Some people you'd read it and say, well, that's good. Some people you'd read it and go, this person should not be writing. So not every person has the ability to write. And the fact that there's 4 of them, that probably means those are the 4 God selected with different styles, but who are gifted actually and able to write out in consecutive, intelligent ways so that people could read it. And so that's probably why there's 4 and not 12. Not everyone can write. So anyway, I hope that answers your questions. That's it from Sunday Nights.